Hey everyone, and welcome to another installment of O.P.P, or as I'm calling it this week, Oh Puppy! This week's submission comes from Son of Fire, who previously submitted the wedding photo. And so let's take a stab at his puppy, but not in a literal way, because that would be weird. So jumping right in, I'm going to knock the exposure up a stop so it's a little easier to see the different. Okay, so let's go with that one. I like that. All right. Another thing is, so I've decided, I'm going to do this in black and white. So let's make that our first step. Let's see how you look. Okay. A friend asked me once, how I decide whether or when to convert something to black and white. And it's an interesting question because before it really wasn't a decision. It was just the medium of choice. Especially if you were a poor college student who really couldn't afford color processing. And now it's another step in a whole bunch of, other things you do, exposure, tone curves, and now black and white or color. For the most part, I generally switch to black and white if I feel like, it serves the picture better. Um, a lot of times, a texture-heavy photo just looks better in black and white. And, like looking at this, the original color, there isn't a lot of color to begin with. And then there's spots of it that's a little distracting. Like this, you can kind of see the flesh through the fur as well as here. And then the color of the hand kind of distracts you from the puppy. So by switching to black and white, it kind of even things out. You can't really see the flesh as much anymore. The hand isn't quite as distracting. And I think it works a lot better. So let's see. I want to make that a little bit darker. Not too dark. Okay, and I pretty much like the auto mix. I mean, this is a pretty simple image. All right, so from here I'm going to go to tone curve. Now, I know that I normally play with these independently, but for this, I think I'm just going to throw on a basic, S curve. Yeah, let's go with that. And then I'll play with these. There's no real reason to it. I like S curves when it comes to black and whites. I think that it adds a lot more contrast, and that's one of the bigger draws of a black and white is, really good contrast. So I'm gonna stick with the classics. In fact, yeah, I want to go to that a little bit more dramatic of an S. All right, and then from there, I'm gonna come into here. Now, as you remember, playing with the temperature kind of affects the quality of the black and white. So I'm actually gonna see if there's anything I like. I kind of dig that. Now, as you can see, there's a pretty strong contrast between the shadow and the light. So I'm going to try and minimize that a little just to bring some detail back in this area. So let's bring the highlights down, and you can actually see the detail come back. I'm not going to go too crazy. Let's say 35. I'm going to open up the shadows on the right. Let's keep it symmetrical. And then overall increase the whites. Not something I would say next time. And let's see. Let's add a little bit more black because I don't want to get rid of the shadow. I just want to open it up a little. Okay. So from here, let's play with clarity. Oh yeah, I like that actually. Not that much. Let's say you. Let's burn you in. So I'm gonna burn, maybe burn. And in this case, when I use the brush as a dodge tool, I don't bother, using the overlay mask. And what I'll do is I'll bring the exposure down to a level at which I'll see it. So the thing that I prefer this way is because if I'm using an overlay mask, it shows me red. And normally that's fine because it makes it easier for me to see what I'm adjusting. But in this case, having it actually show me the exposure makes it a little bit easier to then come in and say soften the edges and really fine-tune that burn, which is what I'm doing now, and just kind of tweaking it. Let's bring that down a little bit, and then once I have that, then I will zero you out and just bring it back a little bit. That much. Nothing too dramatic. Okay, so I think we're good with you. There we go, that's better. Alright. Tone curve's done, black and white is done. Detail. Definitely want detail here. Yeah, he's got this great fur. Just want to okay. Alright. Let's see. Color, black and white. You know, and actually now that I look at it, I kind of prefer the color. It makes this here a little bit more obvious, and so what I'll do is I'll probably just I'll patch that up in Photoshop. But in that case, what I will do is I will take my trusty little slider and I'm going to desaturate that hand just a bit. And I'm going to keep an eye on the puppy as I'm doing it, because you can see that some of the puppy's tones are changing too. But just going to de-emphasize the hand a little bit. That works. Yeah, so I'll actually keep the color. I kind of like the color. Alright, so make it another pass. Not going to split tone it. Actually, maybe I will. Just a hair. Okay, detail's been done. Lens correction. Let's see. Brightens it up all around. Okay. Not going to vignette. As always, I'll do that in Photoshop. So, we went from this to this. Alright, so let's take this into Photoshop and finish it up. Okay, so now that we're in Photoshop, I see that there are a few things I want to do. I want to clean up the background. Definitely want to get rid of this and hide that bald spot, as well as throw on a vignette just to hide the hand in shadow. So let us get right to it. Now for something like this, I know that I'd normally use the patch tool. However, it tends to not work as well in certain situations. And this is just one of those situations I can tell that it'll be a little bit obvious, as you can see. So instead, I'm going to take the clone stamp, and actually I'll drop the opacity to about 80%. I like going less than 100% because it tends with patterns, because it tends to blend it a little bit better. And then I'll just kind of fill it in. Just a nice. See, and then this way I can kind of mimic the grain of the hair, you know, and I can take from other areas almost like a paintbrush and just kind of blend the pattern together. Alright, so let's see how that looks. Much better. Alright, nice and simple. Okay. So now that I've got that done, you'll make that bald spot. Let's make another one, and this will be, oops, backdrop. So what I'm going to do to clean up the backdrop, obviously first I'm going to get rid of these little guys. Okay, so now for something like this, I obviously want to go back to 100 opacity because I'm just covering up. Let's, okay. Now, you may be wondering why I have this layer when, you know, it's still got that. And the reason is I'm only going to be using this layer as a backdrop, nothing else. Okay, that looks kind of obvious, so let's just grab you. Better. So, and I'll show you what I mean. So first off, let's clean up the backdrop by blurring it. Not that way. I meant to use Gaussian blur. There we go. And the reason I meant to use Gaussian blur is because you can throw it to an insane amount and then preview as well to see how it changes. So notice how the backdrop is a lot creamier and silkier. Of course, the downside is that the edges of the dog are going to be really spread out, but one thing at a time. So we've got that, and the next thing we do is we put up a mask because we are going to paint in the backdrop, like so. And then we'll kind of give the dog a bit of a wide berth because we don't want to. See, if you get too close to the dog, then you can see right over here, that's his blurred skin. So we don't want that. So we are going to keep the dog sharp for now and just kind of paint the backdrop. Okay, so now that we've given our dog a nice wide berth and we've given ourselves a nice creamy backdrop, I'm going to bring the brush down a bit and I will drop it to about 20% opacity. I'll just come a little bit closer and then that'll just kind of blend the backdrop. Now if you really scrutinize, you can kind of see the blurred dog. So if we hide the mask, for example, you see how the edges kind of blend out and then it starts to show behind. So it creates a bit of a halo, but since we're only at 20% opacity, it's not that obvious. And if I want, I can still come in and get rid of it. Just like that. The beauty of a layer mask. Okay, that's much prettier. And finally, we are, okay, so now let's make you a group. Duplicate the group. Hide you. Merge you. So now all of our changes are on that one layer, which we will then give ourselves a nice little vignette with. Okay. So just like that, and I will drop you to 20. And I will blend you, and then I will drop the opacity of the layer to, let's see, 20, 30, 40, 30. Just a nice simple vignette to kind of bring the view in. So that's pretty much it. I think we're good. Let me do one last check. Let's see. So every now and then I'll kind of do this while I'm in Photoshop. You know, sort of like after the fact developing, I suppose. You know, I'll throw on a brightness and contrast layer or something and see how it looks. And that's nice, but I don't like him too bright. So I'm going to paint him in with my 20% opacity and just keep some of that detail. So one last thing before we're done. Looking at it now, I kind of want to adjust the composition a bit. So I'm going to take my layers and just move it over right about That's good. Nice and simple. Let's see. And I will actually group and merge. And the reason being because I need to fill this in, and so it's a lot easier when it's a single layer. There we go. Yeah, I kind of like that better. Save it. Come back to Lightroom. And let's see. Okay, so we started with this. We ended with that. So that concludes this week's episode. As always, if you have any photos you'd like me to take a stab at, just stop by the website. Alright, thanks for tuning in. I will see you next week.